Hey guys, it's Rachel and welcome back to the video, and today I am finally showing you guys how to draw in my art style. I've gotten so many requests for this kind of video like over the past few years that I've been on YouTube, and I see why, because my style is quite different from a lot of the different art styles that you usually see. So I hope that this video can kind of help you figure out how to go about trying to draw my art style. So before we get started, I just want to say you should never try to completely copy an art style unless you're trying to practice to create your own style or just practice a way another artist makes their artwork. The point is, you shouldn't really steal an art style and say that it's yours. If you do decide to use my art style and you want to post it on Instagram or something, that's fine. Just go ahead and give credit, and be sure to always give credit to the original artist when you're practicing a different art style. Okay, first I thought we would start off with just like the general shape of my art style. So as you guys can probably tell, it's fairly obvious. Pretty much based off of Minecraft, because I used to play that game a long time ago, but the way the body parts and stuff are shaped are vaguely based off of Minecraft. So I do a lot of like square heads, pretty much a boxy art style in general. One thing to take into account when you're comparing it to Minecraft is that I usually have a lot of my body parts and stuff a little bit more angled, and they taper at certain areas. So I think the top of my heads are slightly larger than the bottom, so where the necks are, and then closer to the hands are going to be a little bit larger than where the shoulders are, and same for the leg, or the foot area is a little bit larger than it is closer to the waist. For the eyes, I do kind of like these basic ovals. So this is one of the things in my art style that isn't necessarily angled, unlike a lot of the other parts of my art style. So many artists make their hair in a bunch of different ways. I tend to do pointed hair, so all of the different hair strokes usually come to points instead of rounded edges. And then last but not least, for the general shape of my characters, I do 3 fingers instead of 4. And then of course a thumb. Why? Because I think it looks cool, I guess. Now for part 2, basically I'm going to talk about how I get started with my sketch and basically my entire process of making a character. The first thing, and arguably the most important, is to go into it knowing what I want. So before I even start sketching, I kind of think in my mind kind of how I want the posing to be of the character, maybe what they're wearing, their hairstyle, just kind of have a rough idea of what I want to come out of this art piece. Then I usually draw the head. The head's always the first thing that I do, because I think it's a very good base for the rest of the artwork. Kind of put the body and the arms based on where the head is. I usually do a few lines for the sketch for the head. It kind of gives me a really good exact shape for when I go over with the inking later. After I'm done with the head, I go in with the torso, so I mess around with the posing of the torso and how I want it to bend and flow, and then I go ahead and do the legs. Sometimes I will end up doing the arms first. It kind of depends on the art piece, but I think I usually end up doing the legs before the arms, because then I can kind of place the arms based on where the legs are. It's kind of hard to completely explain, but you can kind of use the arms to balance out where the legs are placed, so that either they take up more space or it kind of adds to the whole flow of the character and their posing. This is just something that you learn over time and with practice. Next, I draw in the ears. I position these completely based on where the head is angled. So if they're looking left, then of course the ear that's going to be more visible is going to be closer to the middle of the head, and then the one that isn't is going to be almost gone. And I definitely draw the ears before I do the mouth and the eyes, because they take up space on the head, so I know how much room I have for the eyes and the mouth. Next, I do the eyes and the eyebrows. These are like a really big part of my art style, because they assist a lot in the emotion of the character, especially the eyebrows. I think they add so much to the emotion of the character. Plus I do these before the mouth, because again, then I know how much room I have for the mouth. And then I do the mouth. So the mouth, I end up kind of alternating between a few different styles on how I draw it. Depends again on what emotions the character is feeling, what angle they are looking. There's so many different factors that go into it, but I tend to use a lot of the same designs. I will put up a few of the designs so you guys can get a rough idea of what I go for. And then once the mouth is done and I'm happy with how it turned out, I go in with the hair. The hair is arguably my favorite part of the entire character design process. I don't know why, I just think it's a ton of fun to draw, and it can totally characterize someone that you're drawing. So usually if I'm drawing a shorter hairstyle that has the sides of the hair like really short, I usually draw that part first. Then I'll add in like the little sideburns and then put up the rest, and then I will do the stuff on top. If it's a longer hairstyle, so something as long as mine or a little bit shorter or something, I will usually start where like the part is in the hair, and then I will go down from there and do the rest of it. I also have a how I draw hair video. If you guys want to check that out, it'll be in a card. Hair is something that it takes like years to like fully get right, and it takes so much practice, so I can't really go into it that much, but if you guys want to see more on that, you can check out that video. And then the last step to how I do my sketches is, of course, the clothes. How I draw clothes is basically just adding more lines to the existing sketch that I already have. If it's a little bit of a tighter clothing fit, then I really only have to draw a line. If it's something a little bit looser, then I will kind of make those lines extend off of the original sketch. Something to use references for, so you can kind of get an idea of how baggy clothes fold and more for round a body. This is definitely one of the harder parts of creating a character, is clothing, especially for clothes that are going to fold and move in different ways. So definitely look up for references for this, or look at my Instagram so you get more ideas of how I do that. Now that we have a rough idea of how I go about making my art, we're gonna move on to coloring. The number one thing that I notice about my coloring is I tend to go for fairly bright colors. I know a lot of artists that will either go for like strictly pastel colors, or from pretty pale stuff, or even just like black and white. I think this kind of developed as I used Copics for like the majority of my artistic career, and I had fairly bright colors to choose from. Next thing is repeating colors. So if you look at a lot of my digital art, especially, or cards from my Heroic card game, I tend to repeat colors, especially within the clothing. So usually I'll have like 3 or 4 colors that are in the clothing set, and they kind of repeat from top to bottom. So maybe you'll find like a green in the shoulder pads, and then that same green will repeat in like the belt and the shoes. Basically, I'm using repeating colors and balancing them across the entire wardrobe so that it all looks really balanced and the colors complement each other really well. Now we're going to talk about blending. So when I did a lot of my traditional artwork, and I still do traditional artwork, but when I do it, I tend to blend more of my shadows than I do in digital artwork. And I talk a little bit more about blending in my how to do shading video, which will also be in a card. Basically, when I'm making shadows in traditional artwork, I will put down the base coat, then go over with my shadow, and then go ahead and blend it over again. When I'm doing digital artwork, I tend to do more of this like layered shadow style. So instead of blending, I will put down my base coat, and then I will go ahead and do one layer of shadow, and then I'll go in with an even darker shadow color and do another layer. And then it kind of makes this like layered shadow look instead of like it being completely blended. And then last but not least, for when I am coloring, I usually go in with a highlight at the end of the drawing. So once I'm done completely inking everything, I will determine a light source, which I usually already have determined because I had to make the shadow, but then I will make an extra layer or use a colorless blender if I'm doing it traditionally, and just brighten up a certain area depending on where the sun is coming from. So if it's coming from the top left, for example, I will have a highlight on all of the top left parts of each section. So like the top left of the hair, top left of like the skin, clothing, all of that stuff. All right, now that I've gone over the general shape of my art style, how I go about the sketching and the coloring, I'm going to kind of go over like a few different things about my art style that you should know. First thing is, I don't exactly know why I do this, and it's kind of funny, but for girls, I will end up adding eyelashes to them, and for boys, I don't add eyelashes. I think this is kind of just a way for me to differentiate the two, since there's not a lot of technically feminine or masculine features in my art style. Next is I usually end up putting the eyebrows and the eyes line art over the hair. It kind of depends on the image, so sometimes I will try erasing the line art and just see how it looks, but sometimes I think that the hair end up taking too much of the face. But I think the majority of the time I end up having the line art for the eyebrows and the eyes on top of the hair. I usually do this because I think the eyebrows are a really important characteristic of my art style, because they add so much to the emotion of the character, so that's why I usually put them on top. Next is posing, and I don't think this is necessarily important for just my art style. I think a lot of artists do this, but especially now, I try to make my posing a little bit more different and unique by not having a character stand straight up and down. My go-to is to usually have the torso bent in a sort of way and have the hips a little bit pushed forward, and then have the legs angled in the opposite direction that the torso is. This kind of just adds a little bit more movement to the entire posture of the character, makes it less boring. And then my last thing is cross-hatching. I again don't do this on every single artwork, but especially a lot of my traditional stuff or older stuff, I would go in with this really thin liner and do a little bit of cross-hatching around of the shaded areas, and this just adds more texture and detail to the image. All right, guys, I know this is a lot of information thrown your way, but I really hope this helped you guys out, especially if you've been trying to recreate my art style. If you end up recreating my art style and you want to send it over my way, you can either post it on Instagram or send it to me via DM, and don't forget to give credit, of course. But otherwise, if you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like, leave a comment down below, let me know what you guys want to see next on my channel, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notifications for more awesome art videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!